Hello, fellow role players, and welcome to the new template creation suite in Roll. We've been working on this feature for a long time, and we are so excited to get it into your hands. Today, we're going to show you how to create your own template. I'm also going to walk you through the different input types and what they're for, and we're also going to look at the linking system, which is used for automating and connecting game functions across your sheets. Then we're going to look at publishing a sheet and sharing it out with your community. So this is your dashboard. You'll see right now my dashboard is empty because I have not saved or created any templates. But your dashboard is broken into two columns, which, as I said, will fill out as we add more templates to our account. On the left-hand side, you have your Save Templates column. This column is for templates that other people have created that you have saved and added to your library, whether these are templates from your favorite game publisher or game creator or templates from friends of yours and your play group. You'll be able to manage your ever-expanding library of different game sheets over here on the left. On the right, you have My Templates, which is, as you would probably expect, the templates that you own and have created yourself. These are templates that you can edit at any time, make changes to, and of course share out with your friends and community. Let's look at creating a new template. We can click this New Template button here. When we do, we're going to have to give our template a name. Let's call it Roll Characters. Now we're inside the template creator. You'll notice on the left-hand side, this format may be familiar to you if you've played at one of the tables in our Roll interface. This is where your sheet normally would exist if you were playing a game with friends, but you'll notice it's blank because we haven't created a sheet yet. This is going to be used as our preview area as we continue to add inputs, blocks, and sections to our sheet. Here, this large empty space is where we're going to actually do our sheet creation and editing. Now, to understand the breakdown of sheets, you have to understand the structure of them. In the Roll system, sheets are broken into a structure that goes from sections to blocks to inputs. Sections are like the large meta category. You would notice this when you're using the Roll interface and you look on the side and there's a table of contents. Sections are what get indexed in that table of contents. So it could be things like, oh, my saving throw section, or my weapons section, or my spells section. Sections are large categories that have a title and can contain lots of information and then are, as I said, indexed in the system for easy navigation. So let's add a section now. And again, we're going to have to give our section a name. Let's just call this name Character Info, or just Character. How about just Character? Add section. So now you notice it shows up over here, Character. And we also have all of this stuff here now in the editor. You can always, at any time, change the name of a section. So instead of character, if I wanted it to say something else, I could say bioinfo, skills. Let's make it say character for now. Now this section is empty, of course. We can't play anything if there's nothing in here. So what do we need to add? A block. So you can click on this Add Block button. Now, in Roll, there are different types of blocks. Blocks are used for different types of gameplay functions. And so we're going to go over the different types now. You'll see there's an input block, a note block, a point counter block, and a slot tracker block. Let's go through each of these one by one, nice and simple. Let's start with the easiest one, a note block. A note block is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It creates a large empty text box that you can fill in freely as you're playing the game. This is great for anywhere that you just want to add a big empty note section to a part of the sheet, whether this is for you to write descriptions of a skill or a spell or an item or a character bio or just an extra note-taking section somewhere on the sheet for more information. Note blocks are great for creating large spaces empty with text. You'll see here in the editor on this side, we have not just the note block, but we have all this other information too. No matter what type of block you create, every block will have fields for these types of optional additional characteristics. You do not have to fill out any of these, and if you leave them blank, you'll notice they just don't show up over here on the preview. But if you do fill them out, let's say we want to give this note block a title, we'll say Backstory. You'll see over here now, it says Backstory above my note. I can also give it a description. So now you'll see the description also shows up over here. If I destroy or delete the title, now we have just the description over here. We can even upload images, which will, of course, also appear up here. Let's upload an image. Let's try something right now. It's thinking. Give it just a moment. Our system will take whatever image that you've uploaded and it will process it to make sure that it's compressed properly while still looking great so that it loads fast on your friends' sheets when they play with your game. Give the image a second here to cache. This one was a pretty large image, so it may be taking a little while. Well, while we're waiting for that, let's add a title back in. Oh, and there it is. There's our image. So this is actually probably a good time to call this out. Normally, I would think about possibly editing this out of the video, but I actually think it's worth noting. This image I uploaded was very large. This was probably, I want to say, 10 megabytes. It's a very, very high res wide image that we use for, special wallpapers and things here at Roll. If you upload an image to the editor and it seems to be taking a long time, there's nothing wrong, it's not broken, it's probably just processing the image and preparing it for your sheet. And you can see that as we waited, it made its way there. So now we can see this image in our sheet preview over here. We can see it over here in our editor. This is really cool because as you continue to build out your sheet templates for yourself and for your community, you can add all sorts of imagery to them to make them feel rich and personalized and immersive to the fiction of your game. That way, you can still have your sheets feel like they're really from your game world, even though they are custom tailored to fit into the Roll interface. We understand here at Roll that, even though having a common shared interface style is really great, people will want to have their sheets look and feel like they're an artifact from their game world. And so again, images are going to be a great way for you to do that. You can add images to any block, so you can add as many blocks as you want to add as many images as you need to a sheet. So, just to review, we have the block image, block title, block description, and then the actual content of the block, which in this case is a note. These three items here are all optional. We can backspace this out if we wanted. We can backspace this out if we wanted, etc. Let's leave this in here for now. Now, let's say we want to add some more content. We can add another block. You can add the block above the current block here, or you can add it below. Let's add one above it. Let's look at another type of block. Let's look at a point counter block. Point counter blocks are exactly what they sound like. They're a way to track numbers up and down. This is really great for tracking large volumes of numbers, things like health points, money, loyalty tokens, things like that. Most of this you'll see is exactly the same as a note block. We have our section for an image, our section for a title, our section for a description. But then down here, we have the actual point counter. You can leave this as is, and it will start with a default value of 0. And then players, when they're playing the game, can move it up and down as they wish. But if your game has a default value that a certain stat always starts with, you can change this number to be whatever you want, like 55. You can also go into the advanced options here, and we'll get into all the advanced options for the various blocks and things a little bit later in the video. But for now, let's just take a look at this real quick about the point counter. If you click advanced, you'll have these other options here. And one of them is that you can say add a max point counter. If I check that off, you'll notice that now the point counter has two numbers. Because I set it to 55, it's going to currently say we are at a maximum of 55 out of 55 points. But I can set that max to whatever I want. Let's backspace this one out. Let's say 30. So now it's 30, and I have 0 out of 30. Another really cool thing about point counters is they have a little collapsible dot tracker here. This is super handy in games where you want to actually visualize the points that you're tracking. Again, it can be really great for experience points, health counters, or wherever else you can imagine. So these are all empty right now because our stats say 0 out of 30. But if I say 15 out of 30, you'll see that 15 of these are now lit up. So this is, again, a great way for people to visually track where they currently sit on their score counter. And you can, of course, always minimize that as you play. Let's close this advanced tab here. So that's nice. Let's add a slot tracker block. So you'll see here, we have this circle here. I can click it on and off. This is called a slot. Slots are great for tracking critical information that essentially has an on-off state, meaning like I have it or I don't, or I am tracking how many of these have happened. This could be useful for things like saving throws, like death saves, for example. Like you say, oh, my character has 3 death saves before they are finally down and out. Or it could be things like inspiration, or it could be things like saying, my character has a certain number of spell slots and I've now, marked off that I've used them. So for a slot counter, again, it works very similar to what you've already seen, but here you set how many slots. So let's say 5. Now we have 5 slots. Unlike a point counter, the number of slots can't be changed by the player once you've set them in your template. So a point counter, these numbers can be freely edited at any time by the player as they're playing. But a slot tracker, they're going to be given, if I say 5, they're going to be given 5, and they won't be able to have 6. But then they can click on them and turn them on. They can turn individual ones off. You can turn them off in any order. So it's important to note, since this number is locked, that you make sure that you give your game the correct number of slots for whatever the mechanic is. So again, if it's spell slots, you make sure you have the right number of that. If it's death saves, make sure it's the right number for that. But again, slot trackers can be used for all sorts of different things. And they have, a little bit slightly larger visual attention in that the circles are larger. So they make for great key callouts for like major information. Like, oh, like I said, I have a moment of inspiration. I'll make sure I mark that I have inspiration in my character or something like that. Great, cool. Now let's get into the most powerful and exciting block, the input block. This is the most complex type of block because it contains all the other types of game tracking information that your sheet could have. Now you might be wondering, why did we put slots and counters and notes in their own block type and then group all the other inputs into one big block type? And the reasoning is all these other inputs that I'm about to show you can be set to a 1 or 2 column layout, whereas slot trackers, point counters, and notes are always full 1 column width. But if we go here in our input count block, I can now add different input types. Let's say we have this list here now. We say add input. We have buff inputs, dice pool inputs, field and buff inputs, list items, and reference stats. Let's add a field input. So you'll see it here. A field input is exactly what it sounds like. It's a text field. Unlike a note, it's not a text field that is intended to be filled out with long form information. This is something where you would write something like, strength, or maybe it's a place where you're tracking a number, like I have 35 in a certain thing, right? I can give this field a title. So maybe this is my strength score. So I have 35 strength, I can give it a description. You'll notice here that input types within this type of block have their own titles and descriptions separate from just the block title and description. This is really great because as you start to fill out many inputs inside of a block, you might want each of them to have their own unique titles, their own unique descriptions, information that you want them to have. Let's add another one. Let's do a field and buff. A field and buff is pretty much the same as a field, except it now has 2 pieces where information can be tracked. It has the main field, which I can still type whatever I want. And then it has this buff, which has to be a number. So I'm going to say 5. Now what a buff does is, when you're actually playing a game and you click on this number, it will open the die roller and it will add this buff to the die roll. This is a great way to track something critical where you might say, like, again, I might say I have a score of 45 in whatever this is. Again, like maybe it's strength. And in this particular game, Let's say that 45 strength means that I have a buff of +5 on my die rolls. So again, that's a use case where you would want to use a field with a buff attached. So now let's talk about the 1 and 2 column layout that this particular type of block provides for you. So if we scroll to the bottom of this block, input block options, and we click advanced, we'll see that we have 1 and 2 column options. So right now, both of these fields go all the way across the full column. But maybe we think to ourselves, this isn't great for my layout. I want to maximize my space use a little bit better. I can click 2, and look at that. They now line up side by side. Let's leave it at 2. Let's talk about the other input types. Let's look at just a buff input. This one is very similar to a field and buff, except, you guessed it, it's missing the field part. This is great for something where you're just tracking a stat that has a buff to a die roll. So again, like if you don't have to track a secondary piece of information like this, if you just want to track this +5 or something, or in this case, let's say it's 3, you can put that in there, and we can call this like a wisdom save, So I've got +3 here. Let's try another one. Let's say a list item input or a reference stat input. Let's try reference stat. So reference stats, you'll notice it looks kind of like a field, except the entire thing is highlighted in color. Whenever you see anything highlighted in the gradient color throughout the UI, that means when you're playing the game that this is an interactive element. It means that whatever this element is does more than just turn into editable text. So like this field is just editable text. This over here, just editable text. So is this. But this +5, this +3, both open a die roller and add to the die roll. A reference number or a reference stat is a different type of way to compare a stat against dice. So let's say that this reference number is 35. And again, I also want to emphasize, you can leave any of these blank and they will default to 0. So again, if your game doesn't have default stats for some of these scores, you can just leave them blank and players can fill them out themselves. But let's say it's 45 or something for now. The way that this particular type of input will work is when a player clicks on it, it will open the die roller. But instead of adding this number to the die roll, it will simply show the number at the top of the roller as a reference against the roll. This is really great for games that require over-under rolls, or you might be tracking a reference number for other reasons. You might say like, oh, like I have a stat that is 3, and 3 means that I need to get 3 crits in order to succeed on this task. Or it could say I have a reference number of, again, 45. I'm going to roll these dice, and I need to roll over 45 in order to succeed. So again, reference stats are a great way to have mechanics in your game that open the die roller without adding to or altering the die roll score itself. They just serve as reference numbers to compare the result of your roll against. And of course, like depending on the complexity of your game, you could combine these various different types of inputs for different types of mechanics. You could say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to open this with a 45 reference stat. I need to roll over that 45, but I'm using my strength right now, so I'm going to also click this +5, which means I'm going to roll my dice, get that +5 bonus, and hopefully that will help me get over this 45. There's all sorts of great ways you can start to chain these mechanics together, and so we hope that you'll use them in creative ways. Let's look at the dice pool input. This one is one of my favorites, and it's brand new to anybody who's been playing in our early access. You will not have seen this one before. We just finished designing and building it. Very excited about it. This is the dice pool input type. So the way this one works is you'll notice there are 2 different interactive elements. There's a number here and then a die type. This is pretty much what you think it would be. This number represents how many dice. This number represents what kind of die. So when you're setting this up, you can say, okay, this skill always rolls d10s. And I'm going to say I have 4 in this skill. So what's going to happen when somebody's playing the game is if they then click on this input, if they click on this skill, it will open the die roller and it will automatically fill it with this number of D10s. It'll say, oh, I have a score of 4 and it's set to D10. So when I click this, the die roller will open and 4 D10s will automatically be placed in the die roller. I can change this to any die I want and say a D8 or a D20 or a D100. And I can change this score to whatever I'd like. Again, this is super useful for games that have stats that are linked to how many dice you roll. So again, we're excited about this one. This is new to the system, and we hope that, again, you'll use it in new and creative ways. Now, let's talk about the various advanced options that you have for these input types. Oh, wait, actually, before we do that, thanks for your patience. There's a lot of stuff to go over. Let's talk about a list item, the last input type. Not to be forgotten. So, a list item. You'll notice that when I put this one in, it didn't add anything over here. There's just field and buff, reference number, and dice pool. But then what happened here? Why isn't there anything? That's because a list item is basically just a way for you to add extra text anywhere you need it in a block or in an input block. So if you don't fill these two things out, the title or the description, nothing will render here. But I could fill this out and I could say, don't forget your strength buff, right? So this could be just like a little extra note that I've got here, something important for people to remember. Or I could say like, this is my critical strength. Ooh. Critical strength, right? Something like that where I add the title in. So again, if you don't fill this text out, nothing appears. Let's just add a title here. Okay, so now we've covered all the different input types that can be put in an input block. And again, don't forget, you can change that to 1 column or 2 columns, depending on the formatting you want to have. You also don't have to stick to 1 or 2 columns throughout the whole sheet. You could have one block that's got 2 columns, another block that's got 1 column. You can really customize each block to your heart's content. Okay, now let's get into some of the advanced options. There's a lot to learn here, and we're all pretty excited about the ways that you'll be able to connect and set up your sheets through our advanced options system. Now, you should be able to get through creating sheets for almost any game you want with just the stuff I showed you. But if you really want to get into the weeds and get really custom, every single thing you add to your sheet has an advanced options tab that you can open up. Every input has one, every block has one, and even your sections have them. Everything has advanced options. So if you're ever looking to see if there's more you can do, don't be afraid to look in the advanced options tab. Let's take a look here at this one. So in this input type, the advanced options is going to show me a few simple things. It's going to show me information about what this input type is. So if you ever forget how it works or what it could be used for, you'll always find that description in the advanced options. You'll see the ability to move it up or down. So if I say move down, you'll notice, look, it changed order over here. I can move it down one more time, changed order again, move it up. This is great for when you need to move input types around. Maybe you've laid a bunch of stuff out in your sheet and you're thinking to yourself, I don't like the order of these things. I want to move them around. You can use the movement buttons to move them up and down. And then you'll notice there's this one other option here, add toggle. Almost every input type will have this option. If I turn it on, you'll notice a little toggle showed up over here, which I can turn on and off. Turn it on, lights up, turn it off. This is an extra little interactive element that can be added to almost any input and can be used for tracking additional information in your game. For example, you might have, to use the most common example, you might have a list of skills. Let's say you've got 12 skills, and your character is only able to specialize in 3 of them. They may have stats in all of those skills, but they may need to mark which ones they are specialized in. So if you had a toggle on every single one of those skills, they could toggle on the ones that they specialize in and leave the other ones blank. You could use toggles for other things too. One of my favorite use cases for toggles would be Powered by the Apocalypse games, which are playbook based and have lots and lots of information that is used for the player to reference as they play. In a Powered by the Apocalypse game, you might add a list item and put a toggle next to it. Let's do that now, actually. If we go down here to my critical strength, right? So let's say that I have this thing and I say, I'm just gonna put, this is a description. But let's say we have this item here. Let's say that, again, we're playing like a Powered by the Apocalypse game or something, and we have this text item which is explaining maybe one of my character's moves that I can gain. I can go in here and I can say add a toggle. And so now when somebody is playing this game, they can toggle and mark that, oh, I have this skill now. I have this move or this ability. Or they can toggle it off saying, I don't have it right now. There's many uses for toggles. So again, those are always hidden in the advanced options, and you can add them to almost any input type. So you can really start to customize the way that you track information across a sheet. Okay, now let's talk about links. Okay, so here in this particular input type, we still have our description up here, we have our toggle, we have a couple of other options. We have this one simple option that I'm just going to go over super quick. This is the lock option. Lots of different input types are going to have this available to you. And it does pretty much what it sounds like. It locks that number. So when something is filled in like this, when there's no more black, it's just kind of a filled in gradient, that indicates that the player will not be able to alter this number. So this is great for games where you have stats that are permanent and locked and fixed and always are the same. So you might have something where it's like, you have a bunch of bonuses. The bonuses are always +5. The player can never change them, but we just want to have them on the sheet for the player to use and reference as they will. So I'm going to make it +5, and then I'm going to lock that value so that way when somebody's playing, they don't accidentally change this number. Anything you see that's highlighted in the gradient can be locked. So I can lock this buff value. I can go here to my dice pool, and I can lock the dice pool number. I can lock the dice themselves. I can lock both. But you can see, again, that I can lock any of these to make sure that somebody doesn't accidentally edit them if they are a stat that isn't meant to be edited. All right, let's go and take a look now at links. This is really cool. This feature is something that people have requested for quite some time and is our first step towards allowing players to automate actions in their game. So the linking system works like this. Any sort of interactive element, anything with a gradient, again, any sort of interactive element, can be linked to another interactive element so that when you activate one, the other element activates as well. And you can do many links like a chain. Let's add a link to this input. So it's going to ask me what section I'm linking to. We only have one section right now, so we're going to have character. And then it's going to ask us what block within that section. We have a few, but we're going to say character block 1. And then it's going to ask us for input types. So, hang on a second here. There we go. Apologies. Apparently my recording software is making it so I can't hover over these. But yeah, you would select an input type here, and I would say add link. So what's cool here now is you'll see I have linked this right here, this strength buff, to this wisdom save. What that will do is that if you click on this +5 while playing the game, it will automatically click this as well, and both of these will get added to the die roller. Now I can link even more actions. I can say, okay, let's do that again. Let's do this one here. So now this one's also linked to this reference number. So now we have like a whole chain of actions. I can say, oh, when I click this, these are all going to activate. Now it's important to note with input links that when I've linked a bunch of things together, they are always connected to the first thing, the base input that I've chosen. So in this case, it's this buff that I have. But if I wanted to set up links for this one here as well, I'd have to set up a fresh chain of links. This might seem a little inconvenient at first, but actually it's meant to be very powerful in that you might have one particular action, again, like let's say this strength score, that always gets used with other actions, other abilities, other skills, other stats, and you want to make sure that it's always linked. But you might have other things that this is linked to that don't always use this. And so you want to make sure that in the reverse direction that doesn't happen. So every single input can have its own unique chain of links. And again, those can be as long as you'd like. The other cool thing that you can do with links is, besides just picking different input types and linking them together, you can always say, link directly to the die roller. And it will say, all right, what do you want me to do? Let's roll 4 d6s. And so what's going to happen now is, on this particular buff, because I've added this link here, if someone clicks this +3, it will do the +3 on the die roller, but it will also add 6 d6s to the die roller. So this is also a great way if you have a game that has mechanics that are tied to specific dice, you can have them automatically get put in the die roller whenever you click on any of your various stats. And again, you can do that and then still link to other things on the sheet. So now in this case, we have a link system where if I click on this, it adds 4 d6s, and then it's going to add my strength buff, and it's going to add my wisdom save. So you can see how this starts to get pretty powerful. And again, this is just the first version of these tools. We will continue to add more and more advanced links as time goes on, but we hope that for now, you're going to have a lot of tools at your disposal to automate a lot of complex functions across your various games. You'll also see when we add a toggle, if you turn a toggle on, so now this wisdom save here has a toggle attached to it. Another option shows up, toggle links. Toggles can be linked to other toggles. That might be a little confusing, but let me explain. I have this wisdom save here now with a toggle on it. I can turn that on and off. But what if I have a game that says, oh, when you check one thing off, you might have a bunch of things you want to also check off. Anyone who's familiar with the game Mothership would probably be familiar with something like this. On the Mothership character sheets, for example, when you choose which character class you're playing and you check that off, it automatically selects a bunch of other things on the sheet that are relevant to that specific character class. You may want to do something like that in your interactive sheets on Roll. So if you have toggle links, you can say, okay, well, these two here have a toggle, so I'm going to add a link. So now I've linked these two toggles, these two here. When you go into a game, if you click on one of these toggles, or if I click on this toggle, it will automatically click on this one as well. It will select both of them. So this is a great way to mark a bunch of different things on a sheet and chain them together and say, cool, when you mark this, everything gets marked. Great. Okay, let's close that out. So that's the linking system, and those are the advanced options for various inputs. Let's just very quickly look at some advanced options for blocks and for sections. For blocks, you have, of course, when you're in an input block, my column options, 1 column, 2 column. Also, you'll see every block has the ability to add a divider. You'll notice that a divider got drawn right here. I can turn that on or off. This is a great way to visually break up if you have a lot of blocks in a row and a lot of information and you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh man, this is starting to get hard to read. You can always just click and add a divider to the bottom of your block. And then there's this really cool feature. This is another thing that's new to Sheets. Anyone who's been playing in our early access so far will not have seen this yet. This is called duplication. If I turn this on, what this is going to do is it's going to take everything that's in this block, everything you've done, and it's going to add a little button to the bottom here when somebody's playing. So it's not going to show up here in the preview, but it would show up in the game. And the little button will allow them to duplicate the whole block. And what it'll do is it will take the whole block, it will make a copy of it, and it will append that copy underneath the current block. And they can do it as many times as they want. They can make 100 duplicates if they wanted to. And they can also, of course, delete those duplicates. This is really great for tracking information that might be ever expanding, but you don't want to have a sheet template that has like 100 slots. This could be useful for things like inventory management, right? You might say, okay, I'm going to create one block that represents just one inventory slot, and it's going to have a field and it's going to have a little buff stat next to it to show off that each inventory item potentially has a stat buff. And then instead of making 100 of these, I'm just going to turn duplication on and make it so that whenever a player gets a new item, they just click duplicate and the block will duplicate and they can add that new item to the next row. So again, this allows you to keep your sheets somewhat manageable and not have to fill them with tons and tons and tons of fields and inputs to track replicating information. Okay, and now let's look at advanced options for a section. So section options are pretty simple because again, sections are really just the larger categories. So really all we have in a section is the ability to move it up and down. Let's add another section just to also we can take a quick look at how this is going to go. Let's say skills. So now I have a skills section and a character section, and you'll notice they're already getting automatically populated in our index. So skills and character. I can add another one. Spells. Spell, skills, character. Spell, skills, character. And let's say, oh, but character, I want that one at the top. So we go into my advanced options here, move it up. Now character is at the top. So now we have character, spells, and skills. Great. Okay, so let's say that we've gone through and we've made our sheet exactly how we want it. We've filled out all the relevant information, added descriptions where we want them, titles where we want them, images where we want them, gotten our inputs the way we're ready to go, and we are ready to publish. Well, there's one thing we might want to consider doing first, which is setting a default avatar. If you don't set one, that's totally fine. Instead, we will just render a role logo here when somebody creates a new sheet from your template. And of course, this avatar section, a player can change at any time to upload their own custom avatar, right? You might have a cool character portrait you want to put up or something else that is a visual that represents what this sheet represents in the game. But if your players don't upload an avatar of their own and they're playing your game, you might want to have a nice little default icon that goes here. It could be anything. It could be, your logo for your game. It could be kind of a default character portrait that represents your game world. So you can always click set default avatar and put something here. For now, I'm not going to put anything up, but again, you can see how this would work. And then once you've set everything the way you like it, you say publish. It's going to ask if you want to publish now. We're going to say yes. Okay, this sheet is now published. This exists in my account. I can go back to my template library. Oh, and look at that. Role characters. I can see that it was last edited today and it has been published. Okay, now you're really excited. You've made this great sheet. You want to share it with your community. How do you do that? Simple. Click this share button, take this link, copy the link, and send it to anybody you want. You can, of course, embed this link on your website. You can use it on your social media. You can privately message it to your friends and your players, anywhere you want. When somebody clicks on that link, it will automatically open them up to this dashboard, and it will ask them to save the template to their saved templates, and then they will simply have it right there. So in this way, you can easily share your templates across your entire community super fast without people having to go and dig through a bunch of menus to find it. And that's it. That's the Roll Sheet Template Creator. We are so excited to see what you all do with it, and we are going to keep adding to this over time. Thank you, role players, and have a great game.